Many of us receive our paychecks and mourn the loss of income from what we consider to be heavy taxes. But when we look back at the history of taxation on America, perspective helps us see that our modern system is, in many ways, more fair than what our colonial and revolutionary peers dealt with. Our modern system is overly complex, and reform is passionately pursued by many politicians. But let's take a look at how we got here.
In my day, most tax revenues came from tariffs, customs duties, and excise taxes. Individual taxpayers like myself really had no personal obligations to developing the central government.
However, we colonists, still dependent on and obligated to England, were taxed by British Parliament. England needed money to pay for its war on France, and us in the colonies were a vulnerable target.
This led to allegations of tyranny and protests of taxation without representation. Three battles raged within the colonies during this time over unfair taxes. They came to be known as the Boston Tea Party, the Stamp Act Opposition, and Shays' Rebellion.
In 1765, British Parliament imposed a tax on its colonies, requiring many print materials to carry a tax stamp, which had to be paid in British currency. Demonstrations and protests, especially those led by the Sons of Liberty, became violent. The stamp tax collectors were intimidated out of their positions by the masses, and the taxes ceased to be collected.
In 1773, after refusing to return shiploads of taxed tea to Britain, a group of rebel colonists climbed aboard the ships and dumped the cargo into the harbor. They were demonstrating against the Tea Act, which heavily taxed their tea and was seen as a violation of their right to be taxed only by their own authorities. 2 years later, Britain presented the Conciliatory Resolution, ending taxation for colonies that provided for the imperial defense. The Tea Act was repealed with the Taxation of Colonies Act in 1778.
Shays' Rebellion was an armed uprising in 1786 in Massachusetts against what many considered crippling taxes. Many of Daniel Shays' partners in the rebellion were poor farmers who were faced with imprisonment for their inability to pay the taxes they owed. The group attempted to shut down the courts to protect their properties from being seized and prevent punitive sentences. After several years of battling the courts, organizers were convicted on charges relating to the rebellion, but were later given total amnesty.
To pay the debts of the war, taxes were placed on carriages, spirits, tobacco, sugar, and legal documents, just to name a few.
This again led to unrest, specifically in the form of the Whiskey Rebellion.
During George Washington's presidency, the government decided to tax whiskey in order to pay off the national debt. The citizenry was enraged because many Western settlers could only ferment and distill their grain crop due to the length of time it took to transport their goods to market. Whiskey was also often used as a form of bartering currency at the time. The rebellion took the form of an unorganized resistance, including mail robbery and threats of an assault on the city of Pittsburgh. The tax was repealed in 1803. The first federal income tax, which was 3%, came after the Civil War. Congress also heavily taxed non-essential or luxury purchases, such as billiard tables, feathers, pianos, and yachts, and charged licensing fees for many professions and trades. Most of these taxes were repealed after the war, when spending was again under control.
Several years later, in 1913, the 16th Amendment was added to the Constitution, stating that Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. This led to reinstatement of income tax and the introduction of the 1040 form, still in use today. Taxes have evolved greatly since then, with the creation of the Internal Revenue Service, the addition of Social Security, and the effects of fluctuating inflation rates. The trend throughout our more than 200-year history has been that in times of war, the government makes changes to our tax structure to cover their expenses. Different political parties have had differing tax strategies and economic opinions. Some political candidates have emphasized their tax plans in their platform, such as Bob Dole's flat tax, which was intended to simplify the increasingly convoluted tax structure. Our current tax system is incredibly complex, with confusing codes and detailed brackets and exemptions that have spawned a whole industry of tax preparation services, software, seminars, and instructional books.
Looking ahead, our current national debt, recession economy, unemployment rate, and defense spending will likely require tax changes in the near future.